I'm your host, Jimmy Chen. Arrgh.
Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm Jimmy Chan, your friendly neighborhood Holy Bible explainer. My channel is called Food for HNM. Today I will read to you and of course explain 2 Kings 21. The next section is titled Manasseh, King of Judah. Manasseh was 12 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 55 years. 5-5. You know, it's funny when people don't enunciate the word five. Well, they go fi. How many would you like? Fi. Five? Yeah, five. Another one is strategy and strategy. Some people don't realize they say strategy, but the real word is strategy. You say, the guy says something like, we have to use strategy. And you're like, you mean strategy? Yeah, strategy. And you're like, strategy. Yeah, that's what it says. Strategy did. Okay, his mother's name was Hephzibah. So Manasseh, he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, following the detestable practices of the nations the Lord had driven out before the Israelites. He rebuilt the high places his father Hezekiah had destroyed. He also erected altars to Baal or Baal and made an Asherah pole, as Ahab, king of Israel, had done. He bowed down to all the starry hosts and worshipped them. So Manasseh, he's not like his father Hezekiah. Hezekiah was a very good king. He built altars in the temple of the Lord, of which the Lord had said, in Jerusalem I will put my name. In the two courts of the temple of the Lord, he built altars to all the starry hosts. He sacrificed his own son in the fire, practiced divination, sought omens, and consulted mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the eyes of the Lord, arousing his anger. He took the carved Asherah pole he had made and put it in the temple. Asherah poles are usually not in the temple, of which the Lord had said to David and to his son Solomon, in this temple and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. I will not again make the feet of the Israelites wander from the land I gave their ancestors, if only they will be careful to do everything I commanded them, and will keep the whole law that my servant Moses gave them. But the people did not listen. Manasseh led them astray. So just like there was a certain president who talked about, like Kun something and something virus. The senators, the Democratic senators, they agreed that when he talks like that from the presidential stand, right? Usually he'll be on the news and officially speak. That actually affects people. Right after he said that, a lot of Asian people, like some old Asian people, were being attacked by other people. A lot of Asian Americans and Asian people started to get attacked and hurt because of those careless words a former president spoke. So we can see that, likewise, Manasseh, he's a king, but he did not follow as these books say, follow the Lord with all his heart, as David, the great king, did. King David's the coolest. So people will just follow him, copy him, and also, worship false gods and break their covenant to only worship the Lord, the God that created everything. So that they did more evil than the nations the Lord had destroyed before the Israelites. They became more twisted and sick. Remember, followers of Molech would burn their children in the fire, barbecue their children. The Lord said through his servants, the prophets, Manasseh, king of Judah, has committed these detestable sins. He has done more evil than the Amorites who preceded him, and has led Judah into sin. Not Judah. Remember, there was Israel in the north and Judah in the south. All of it is Israel, but the kingdom split into two. A northern, which was Israel, and a southern, which is Judah. But Judah was always of the house of David. They followed, the Lord's commands. And they were closer to the Lord. Their kings also followed the Lord. So now Judah is led into sin by Manasseh with his idols. Therefore, this is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says: I am going to bring such disaster on Jerusalem and Judah that the ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. I will stretch out over Jerusalem the measuring line used against Samaria, and the plumb line used against the house of Ahab. I will wipe out Jerusalem as one wipes a dish, wiping it and turning it upside down. I will forsake the remnant of my inheritance and give them into the hands of enemies, probably the Babylonians. They will be looted. Remember, Marduk, his name. So remember, there was a Assyrian king named Shalmaneser, and we were introduced to a Babylonian king named Marduk. Is a hard name to remember. Baladan, probably. Let's see. In 2 Kings 20, verse 12, Marduk Baladan. Okay, so we're introduced to Marduk Baladan, king of Babylon. So perhaps Judah will be given into the hands of the Babylonians. They will be looted and plundered by all their enemies. They have done evil in my eyes and have aroused my anger from the day their ancestors came out of Egypt until this day. Moreover, Manasseh also shed so much innocent blood that he filled Jerusalem from end to end, besides the sin that he had caused Judah to commit, so that they did evil in the eyes of the Lord. As for the other events of Manasseh's reign and all he did, including the sin he committed, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? Manasseh rested with his ancestors and was buried in his palace garden, the garden of Uzzah, and Amon, his son, succeeded him as king. The next section is titled Amon, king of Judah. Amon was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 2 years. His mother's name was Meshullemeth, daughter of Haruz. She was from Jotbah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, as his father Manasseh had done, so he also. Not like his grandfather Hezekiah, he followed completely the ways of his father, worshipping the idols his father had worshipped and bowing down to them. He forsook the Lord, the God of his ancestors, and he did not walk in obedience to him. Amon's officials conspired against him and assassinated the king in his palace. Then the people of the land killed all who had plotted against King Amon, and they made Josiah, his son, king in his place. As for the other events of Amon's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? He was buried in his tomb in the garden of Uzzah, and Josiah, his son, succeeded him as king. Let's go to the next chapter, 2 Kings 22. The next section is titled The Book of the Law Found. Josiah was 8 years old, only 8, when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. His mother's name was Jedidah, daughter of Adaiah. She was from Bozkath. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, and followed completely the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. In the 18th year of his reign, King Josiah sent the secretary Shaphan, son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, to the temple of the Lord. He said, "Go up to Hilkiah the high priest and have him get ready the money that has been brought into the temple of the Lord, which the doorkeepers have collected from the people, have them entrusted to the men appointed to supervise the work on the temple, and have these men pay the workers who repair the temple of the Lord, the carpenters, the builders, and the masons. So later on, when Jesus Christ, He is the Lord, it's mind-boggling if you really think about it. You know, He's the Lord, you know. He's God, you know. He used to talk, and then you can't see Him, you know. He's like really loud, or like maybe you couldn't hear Him, only prophets could hear Him. And then He had prophets who could hear Him, and they had like magical powers like me, but their powers were like stronger than mine, you know. I've actually kind of seen Moses, like in a vision, met him. But He would come in human form. This is 2,000 years ago, in the past, in our past, but in where we are in the story, it's in the future, you know, in relation to where we are in this story. But it's mind-boggling because, you know, people were used to the prophets, and they're like Jedi. They knew that they spoke to God, you know, the Lord. And, you know, like, the prophets, they wrote things, and then, you know, maybe they knew back then, like, oh, one day, you know, these ancient Israelites were like, one day, something's going to happen, you know, something amazing is going to happen. Like, I don't know, you know, somehow God is coming, you know, in a greater way. And we know that He came in human form. You know, He came as fully God and fully man, walked the earth as one of us. But He was a carpenter. That's why I bring it up. In verse 6, the temple, pardon me, the temple, like any building, needs to be maintained. Pardon. So there was money that was collected from people, and then it would be given to carpenters, builders, and masons to fix the temple. So, you know, the Lord, He had like a hobby, because He really was the king of Israel, you know. Some people don't really know that. They think Herod was the king. Herod was a king, but he is known as the King of Kings. That means he was more like the emperor of Israel. Now, a lot of this stuff is lost in history. You know, we'll never know, you know, because the people that were around then are gone. We don't have any writings from back then, really. You know, all the buildings have fallen apart and turned to dust, you know. But that's who he was. So he had like a hobby. He was a carpenter, and he could like fix the temple, you know. Verse 7, but they need not account for the money entrusted to them, because they are honest in their dealings. Hilkiah, the high priest, said to Shaphan, the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord. He gave it to Shaphan, who read it. So Shaphan could read. Then Shaphan, the secretary, went to the king and reported, that's Josiah, reported to him, your officials have paid out the money that was in the temple of the Lord and have entrusted it to the workers and supervisors at the temple. Then Shaphan the secretary informed the king, Hilkiah the priest has given me a book. So he had a book, and Shaphan read from it in the presence of the king. when the king heard the words of the book of the law, so this is somewhere like in his 18th year of reign, he was 8. So he's like 20-something, 26. He tore his robes. He was angry. He gave these orders to Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam, son of Shaphan, Akbor, son of Micaiah, Shaphan the secretary, and Asaiah, the king's attendant. He said, "Go and inquire of the Lord for me, and for the people, and for all Judah, about what is written in this book that has been found." So the book of the law is just these first 5 books that Moses wrote. Because you have to remember that he's a good king, and then his father, Amon, wasn't, and then his grandfather, Manasseh, wasn't, but his great-grandfather, Hezekiah, was a very good king. Josiah is a very good, he's good. Like, he's going to be a really good king. So he found these books. See, we have them right here. That we're reading 2 Kings, but if you look at the Bible book list, we have Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. It sounds like Deuteronomy, like doo-doos, but it's Deuteronomy, like astronomy. Deuteronomy. Genesis, Exodus, again, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Those 5 were written by Moses, the greatest prophet. He had these 2 stone tablets, and they had the 10 commandments on them. You know, there's some movies you could see him like an old dude holding 2 stone tablets. Those 10 commandments he received from God, but he received many commandments. Alright, let's go back to what we're reading. So Josiah, remember, so there's like 2, but his father was only king for 2 years. There's something like 2 generations of there being bad kings, and then the entire land is all confused. You know, they're following false gods and doing terrible things, like it's called detestable practices. You know, like burning their own kids in the fire, and maybe even worse, that might be the reason it's not recorded. So everyone's all evil and goofed up and like animals, and you know, someone finds Moses' writings again. You know, I think it's Hilkiah. He gives it to Shaphan, and Shaphan reads it to King Josiah, and he says, "Great is the Lord's anger." He said, God must be angry against us, because those who have gone before us have not obeyed the words of this book. They have not acted in accordance with all that is written there concerning us. Hilkiah the priest, Ahikam, Akbor, Shaphan, and Asaiah went to speak to the prophet Huldah. Alright, here's a new Jedi. Huldah, who was the wife. Oh, it's a lady Jedi, lady prophetess. So it's actually a prophetess. To the prophetess Huldah, who was the wife of Shalom, son of Tikvah, the son of Harhas, keeper of the wardrobe. She lived in Jerusalem in the new quarter. She said to them, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Tell the man who sent you to me. This is what the Lord says. I am going to bring disaster on this place and its people, according to everything written in the book the king of Judah has read, because they have forsaken me and burned incense to other gods and aroused my anger by all the idols their hands have made. My anger will burn against this place and will not be quenched till the king of Judah, who sent you to inquire of the Lord. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says concerning the words you heard. Because your heart was responsive, and you humbled yourself before the Lord, when you heard what I have spoken against this place and its people, that they would become a curse and be laid waste, and because you tore your robes and wept in my presence, I also have heard you, declares the Lord. This morning I played some Christian music, and some people felt weepy. That's kind of a good sign, You wept in my presence. It's because your heart, verse 19 again, because your heart was responsive and you humbled yourself before the Lord when you heard what I have spoken against this place and its people, that they would become a curse and be laid waste. And because you tore your robes and wept in my presence, I also have heard you, declares the Lord. Therefore I will gather you to your ancestors, and you will be buried in peace. Your eyes will not see all the disaster I am going to bring on this place. So they took her answer back to the king. So Josiah, when he read the book of the law, he knew that God, the Lord, he laid these rules down, right? And everyone was breaking them. So he said, I know that God must be angry at us. So I guess some people don't care, like if they break the law or if they break commandments, if they hurt other people. You have heard what I've spoken. Wept. So there's something like humanness, something like human kindness, loving kindness, chesed. There's normal behavior. There's normal sensibility. That's all that I think the Lord is talking about. Like sometimes some people are real monsters, real jerks. Sometimes I think that they really are not human, Someone like Hitler or someone like Pol Pot. Someone like anyone, there are people in history that we look up to, and there are these supervillains. If you met them, look them in the eye, they probably don't have that spark of humanness in them. And believe it or not, there still are people like that right now among you. They lie to you. Because if it's one thing about what the Bible calls the enemy, they are liars and snakes. They like to fool you with smiles, and then they stab you in the back. And they're very deceptive, They have like some kind of cunning, but they're more like a reptile. They're more like reptiles. Your eyes will not see all the disaster. Okay, so let's read one more chapter. 2 Kings 23. Now, the next section is called Josiah Renews the Covenant. Then the king called together all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem. He went up to the temple of the Lord with the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the priests and the prophets. I don't know how many prophets there were, but when Ahab, there was a king named Ahab. That is not too long ago from this point in the story. But back then, Elijah, the great prophet, he said, I'm the only one left. But there was another guy named Obadiah who was hiding all these prophets in a cave. I think some of them might have been children, like young prophets. So all the people from the least to the greatest. So once again, it is the king's job to read the book of the law to all the people, audibly in their hearing. He read in their hearing all the words of the book of the covenant, which had been found in the temple of the Lord. The king stood by the pillar and renewed the covenant in the presence of the Lord, to follow the Lord and keep his commands, statutes, and decrees with all his heart and all his soul, thus confirming the words of the covenant written in this book. Pardon me, I just had to voice something. Then all the people pledged themselves to the covenant. The king ordered Hilkiah the high priest, the priests next in rank, and the doorkeepers to remove from the temple of the Lord all the articles made for Baal or Baal and Asherah and all the starry hosts. He burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of the Kidron Valley, and took the ashes to Bethel. He did away with the idolatrous priests appointed by the kings of Judah to burn incense on the high places of the towns of Judah and on those around Jerusalem, those who burned incense to Baal, to the sun and moon, to the constellations, and to all the starry hosts. He took the Asherah pole from the temple of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem and burned it there. He ground it to powder and scattered the dust over the graves. Over the graves of the common people. He also tore down the quarters of the male shrine prostitutes that were in the temple of the Lord, the quarters where women did weaving for Asherah. Josiah brought all the priests from the towns of Judah and desecrated the high places, from Geba to Beersheba, where the priests had burned incense. He broke down the gateway at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, or Yehoshua, the city governor. Gross, pardon me. See, I'm not a CGI. I'm a real person. Which was on the left of the city gate. Although the priests of the high places did not serve at the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, they ate unleavened bread with their fellow priests. He desecrated Topheth who was in the valley of the Ben Hinnom. So no one could use it to sacrifice their son or daughter in the fire to Molech. He removed from the entrance to the temple of the Lord the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun. They were in the court near the room of an official named Nathan Melech. Josiah then burned the chariots dedicated to the sun. He pulled down the altars the kings of Judah had erected on the roof near the upper room of Ahaz, and the altars Manasseh had built in the two courts of the temple of the Lord. He removed them from there, smashed them to pieces, and threw the rubble into the Kidron Valley. The king also desecrated the high places that were east of Jerusalem. The king also desecrated the high places that were east of Jerusalem on the south of the hill of corruption. The ones Solomon, king of Israel, had built for Ashtoreth, the vile goddess of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the vile god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable Momo-Leglek, god of the people of Amon. Josiah smashed the sacred stones and cut down the Asherah poles and covered the sites with human bones. Even the altar at Bethel, the high place made by Jeroboam, son of Nebat, who had caused Israel to sin, even that altar and high place, he demolished it. He burned the high place and ground it to powder, and burned the Asherah pole also. Then Josiah looked around, and when he saw the tombs that were there on the hillside, he had the bones removed from them and burned on the altar to defile it, in accordance with the word of the Lord proclaimed by the man of God who foretold these things. I remember when that happened. There was a man of God who prophesied against the altar, and then he was told to go back. You have to watch an earlier video. The way he came, and he was tricked by another prophet, and that man of God got attacked by a lion and died. The king asked, "What is that tombstone I see?" The people of the city said, "It marks the tomb of the man of God who came from Judah and pronounced against the altar." It's funny, another prophet was buried right next to him, who came from Judah and pronounced against the altar of Bethel the very things you have done to it. Leave it alone, he says. Don't let anyone disturb his bones. So they spared his bones and those of the prophet who had come from Samaria. Just as he had done at Bethel, Josiah removed all the shrines at the high places that the kings of Israel had built in the towns of Samaria, and that had aroused the Lord's anger. Josiah slaughtered all the priests of those high places on the altars and burned human bones on them. Then he went back to Jerusalem. The king gave this order to all the people: Celebrate the Passover to the Lord your God, as it is written in this book of the covenant, neither in the days of the judges who led Israel, nor in the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah had any such Passover. Been observed, but in the 18th year of King Josiah, this Passover was celebrated to the Lord in Jerusalem. Furthermore, Josiah got rid of the mediums and spiritists, the household gods, the idols, and all the other detestable things seen in Judah. And Jerusalem, this he did to fulfill the requirements of the law written in the book that Hilkiah the priest had discovered in the temple of the Lord. Neither before nor after Josiah was there a king like him who turned to the Lord as he did with all his heart and with all his soul, and with all his strength, in accordance with all the law of Moses. Nevertheless, the Lord did not turn away from the heat of his fierce anger, which burned against Judah, because all that Manasseh had done to rouse his anger. So the Lord said, I will remove Judah also from my presence. I will remove Israel, and I will reject Jerusalem, the city I chose, and this temple about which I said, my name shall be there. As for the other events of Josiah's reign and all he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Judah? While Josiah was king, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up to the Euphrates River to help the king of Assyria. King Josiah marched out to meet him in battle, but Necho faced him and killed him at Megiddo. Josiah's servants brought his body in a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem and buried him in his own tomb. And the people of the land took Jehoahaz, son of Josiah, and anointed him and made him king in place of his father. The next section is titled Jehoahaz, king of Judah. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 3 months. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah. She was from Libnah. He did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his predecessors had done. Pharaoh Necho put him in chains at Riblah in the land of Hamath, so that he might not reign in Jerusalem. And he imposed on Judah a levy of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, son of Josiah, king in place of his father Josiah, and changed Eliakim's name to Jehoiakim, but he took Jehoahaz and carried him off to Egypt, and there he died. Jehoiakim paid Pharaoh Necho the silver and the gold he demanded. In order to do so, he taxed the land, exacted the silver and gold from the people of the land according to their assessment. The next section is titled Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 11 years. His mother's name was Zebedah, daughter of Pedaiah. She was from Rubah, and he did evil in the eyes of the Lord, just as his predecessors had done. Let's read. No more than that, because Jews and Filipinos are stunned. Repeat me. You can probably hear it, because I got them roboted. Thank you for joining me, and remember, keep God first. He'll take you places.